May 2006 Wound Care for Cows Aussievet at CFC Van Krishna's trial. A special report now 8 months old. Van Krishna is still Van Krishna, a 1-month-old Bambi at Care for Cows. Van Krishna cuddling a favorite calf drinks cow's milk. Van Krishna's trial. A special report by Dr. Karen Curtis. I am sitting next to the sweetest creature, watching him placidly eating the pipul leaves gathered for him. Van Krishna's gentle liquid brown eyes seem to gaze upon me with steady curiosity, and they give away none of the pain that has been so prominent in his life up to this point. Occasionally he will turn to look at his stump, its large scar, a cruel reminder of the inhumanity some humans are capable of. At this time, however, the careful nudging of his stump only prompts me to fan him more vigorously. Today he was getting a break from the constant bandaging, but because of the flies, the dirt, and the risk of him tearing his sutures on the ground, I am sitting with him for the day. My crude paper fan serves to reduce the fly burden when the electricity in his sick room cuts out and the ceiling fan stops, allowing a hot, heavy atmosphere to settle on us both. Van Krishna smacks his lips together, still slightly sticky from his earlier feast of pawpaw and watermelon, and rests his delicate head on my toes. He is preparing to sleep, which will give me an opportunity to tell you his story. Van Krishna came to the Goshala after his mother was attacked by wild street dogs in Vrindavan. A tiny fawn, he took quickly to Kurmarupa and soon began accepting milk given by the Goshala cows, by the bottle. He would hang out during the day with the other small calves, and quickly built a following both with the calves and with all visitors to Care for Cows. He was a delicate little thing, and seemed very fragile in comparison to the calves. Have been able to save the leg. Devotees don't give up on one of Krishna's animals easily, especially not Radharani's pet deer. An X-ray of his leg was taken, with the hope that we may have been able to screw plates onto his bones to hold them in position. When we saw the quality of the bone that was protruding, the prognosis for saving the leg became very grave indeed. The bone was black, and the flesh surrounding the wound in all directions was dying away. In addition, the X-ray showed that the migration of the pin had caused additional damage. There were many bone fragments floating free in his leg. It resembled a bag of ice on X-ray. The bone plates available at the hospital were designed for small animals like cats and dogs, and would not bear the weight of a large animal like Van Krishna, nor were they long enough to adequately span across all his fracture sites. Tragically, we would be unable to save Van Krishna's leg, but we still wanted to save his life, so he went back into theater for an amputation. Dr. Pandey commenced the 4-hour procedure and I had the opportunity to finish it. In rather trying conditions, the power went off for the final hour, so I was left to sew the wound closed in darkness, with 2 students holding rapidly fading torches and no air circulating in the room, and no forceps. This was certainly a change from the luxurious surgical suites I was used to in Australia. After the amputation, we were all looking forward to a trouble-free recovery, and initially it appeared that it would occur. The day after his amputation, Van Krishna stood up with the Gopa's assistance and walked into the vegetable patch to begin grazing the grass between the removing infected skin. Unable to save his leg, Dr. Karen joins the amputation surgery team caused by the pin. Van Krishna adjusts to standing on 3 legs rows. We were overjoyed, but this optimism gradually faded over the next week, as infection set into Van Krishna's stump. Markets were deserted out of fear of the riots, and all the houses were locked. We gathered in an empty courtyard and my men went out to search for food. Soon 4 of my men returned pulling a chubby cow behind them. I didn't know how that poor one fell in the claws of those hungry wolves. One of them had tied his turban around her neck and before I could say anything they tied the legs of that crying cow and threw her down on the ground. Who would save a dumb cow from the hands of the Muslims in the middle of that riot? Cow protection. The following is based on a true story from Gosava Kamatkar, an historical collection of cow miracles. At that time all those so-called leaders of Hindu religion, those who give long lectures on cow protection, were all safely hidden in holes. The cow was tired. Tears were falling from her eyes and I was agitated out of hunger. My body was weak. it is against my religion to consider the cow holy and to serve her. But seeing that innocent cow surrounded by those cruel wolves who were sharpening their knives and about to kill her, I felt pity on her. The cow was frightened and pregnant, and seeing her I remembered my pregnant wife, and I began to shiver. I stood up with courage and said to my friends, "Can't you see that out of hunger I'm about to die, and you fools are not yet able to provide me food? All of you immediately go and collect wood and salt and I will take care of this." As soon as my friends left I took the knife which was meant for killing the poor cow, cut her loose, and patted her back. At first she couldn't stand up, unable to believe this behavior from me. I stroked her again and she stood up, stretched herself and swished her tail. At that moment she glanced at me in such a way as if telling me, "You will be rewarded for your kindness." She then left, quickly disappearing out of sight. When my friends returned I was lying on the ground, as if unconscious from hunger. They shook me and asked about the cow. I pretended that I had no idea what had happened. Having no energy to pursue her, Elephant Orphanage. She also worked at the University of Maryland's dairy as a milkmaid, the American equivalent of a gopi. While in the US she also tried her hand at racetrack work at Saratoga Springs, but decided the early mornings were all too much. As she preferred cows, she completed a short externship in large animal surgery at Cornell University before graduating at Melbourne. Since graduation Karen has been working in rural practice in Central West NSW in Australia, but finished work a month ago to come and serve at Care for Cows. When she arrived at our Gosadan in April on that hot, dusty summer afternoon asking, "Is there anything I can do?" We knew that she was sent here especially at that time to look after Van Krishna, who had just been injured 2 days earlier. Her bag was filled to capacity with colorful, stretchy self-sticking bandages, a first for India, surgical instruments, and all sorts of medical odds and ends, a donation from Karen and her husband to Care for Cows. Karen's service began immediately, and as the days went by her service increased with intensive care for Van Krishna as her priority, and regular rounds of our other residents twice a day. To date during Karen's stay she has tended to Rayu's hoof abscess, a mild mange outbreak amongst the calves, Pushpa's number of minor ailments, Braja's continuous leg mending struggle, Shyam's bumps and cuts, Somaresa's spot of discharge developed from his mended fracture site, and individual check Osivet at CFC ups. Karen is also giving invaluable classes on medical care for cows, practical training in the latest methods of wound care, how to perform a complete and thorough cow checkup, an overview of drug uses and administering injections. Working side by side with our simple-hearted cowherd men, she picks up common Hindi words and communicates the patient's conditions to them with a lot of gesturing thrown in. But how can she tell Sushil each time that he brings Suradasi, our blind cow, to her, asking if she can at least bring back sight in one of her eyes, that something's model patient. Peaceful and gentle by nature, Karna affectionately licks whoever comes to spend some time with him. By Dr. Karen Curtis, many of the cows that come to the Care for Cows facility have had accidents on the streets of Brindavan and as a consequence, present with a variety of wounds. Trauma accounts for most of the wounds, be it from car or tractor accidents or sometimes, unfortunately, malicious injuries. Regardless of the cause of the injury, the task that then faces the dedicated workers of Care for Cows is how to look after the wound. Wounds, such as cuts, grazes and other fleshy injuries, can be classified into two main groups: those that are clean and those that are contaminated. Clean wounds are usually the result of planned surgery, or may have just occurred, and depending on the severity and site, may be sutured closed by a veterinarian. Contaminated wounds, on the other hand, require a bit more management and nursing care. As the cows of Brindavan live on the streets, in what can be less than sanitary conditions, almost all of the wounds seen at the Goshala are contaminated. When an wounded cow arrives at the Goshala, the first priority is to ensure the cow has no major, life-threatening injuries and no bone damage, such as broken bones. Once this threat has been cleared, the treatment of open wounds can commence. In order to assess the extent of the wound, it needs to be bathed and cleaned, and all foreign matter, such as sticks, gravel, dirt, and rubbish, removed. Iodine diluted in water to the color of black tea or salt water are both excellent for bathing wounds, as they are soothing and can be used in large amounts to help flush foreign matter out. Some human antiseptics can be harmful to animals as they have a different skin pH, acidity. Stump consisted of a few different layers. Firstly, sugar would be packed onto his open wound, to create a good healing environment. This layer would be covered with gauze swabs. A spray is applied to help dissolve. Local anesthetic is injected before removing dead tissue. A syringe of diluted iodine flushes deep into the wound dead tissue, which prevented the cotton wool from sticking to the wound and helped keep the sugar in place. The cotton wool also acted as padding to help protect his stump when he was lying down. When available, a layer of a stretchy, cohesive bandage called Vetrap was placed around the cotton wool, and thick elastoplast bandaging with an adhesive backing was used to bind the whole thing together. This elastoplast layer was taken up and over Van Krishna's back, as his stump was a very awkward angle, and if it was not securely bandaged above his knee and over his back, it would only be a matter of minutes before the bandaging was off again. Changing the dressings is an important part of wound care. Wounds are dynamic and are constantly changing, hopefully for the better but sometimes for the worse. Regular bandage changes allow us to see what is going on with the wound and to clean and remove exudates. Initially, Van Krishna's bandages required changing every 12 hours, as he had a large area of contamination where the intramedullary pin had protruded through his skin. His cotton wool would be soaked through with a pus discharge, and he did a very effective job of loosening his bandages himself through his nibbling. At each bandage change, his wound would be bathed with diluted iodine before rebandaging. After his second operation, as the wound progressed and began to heal, the bandage changes were reduced to only once a day. Depending on the progress, we hope to cut bandage changes back further in the near future. This will mean less stress for Van Krishna and less expense in bandages. The essence of wound care: clean, debride, provide a nice healing environment are the same for nearly all wounds, but each wound is individual and the details of the management of each wound will be different. As wound healing is a dynamic process, what is useful at the start of the healing procedure may not be appropriate at the end, so careful, flexible management is required. Other medications may also be prescribed by the veterinarian. In Van Krishna's case, he also had injectable antibiotics and pain relief, but remember that antibiotics will not make up for a shoddy cleaning job and they cannot ever replace good nursing. Van Krishna's wound was an extraordinary case of determination on his part and an excellent, dedicated team helping him. All of the Gopas and Gopis of the Goshala put in a vast amount of time, resources, and money. I hope that by using his wound as an example on how to care for wounds, that Van Krishna can inspire other people around the world the same way he has inspired us all here at Care for Cows in Vrindavan. Bandaging with both gauze contaminated skin was trimmed back to reveal healthy tissue. Granulated sugar promotes growth of new cells and elastoplast life. On the streets early one morning in Vrindavan we received a call about an injured bull found resting on the Parikram Marg. He was bleeding on his right side and it seemed he'd been sideswiped by a vehicle. No one seemed to have seen what had happened and no one took responsibility. The hustle and bustle on Vrindavan's poorly kept streets and laneways takes its toll on most abandoned cows sooner or later. Especially during auspicious times such as the month of Kartika, Janmashtami and other holy festivals when the biggest crowds flock to Vrindavan. Unable to cope with the swelling numbers of overpacked vehicles, Vrindavan's streets become somewhat like a Dodgem car rink. Please help us to acquire more land to accommodate and protect Vrindavan's abandoned cows, bulls, and calves. Providing shelter, food, and care for the abandoned cows in Krishna's holy land. Care for Cows in Vrindavan. When Dukhi arrived at Care for Cows, he had no self-worth and was feeling very dejected after a hard time in a world seemingly devoid of kindness. Today he still wears the scars from those years of abuse, but he has come to know of a different world where he is cared for and treated with respect. Now his name has been changed from Dukha, meaning sad one, to Prasadam or the Lord's mercy. Please help us to bring about a positive change in the lives of more abandoned cows and bulls. For information regarding Care for Cows Land Fund, sponsor a cow, feed the herd, or to make a contribution online, please visit www.careforcows.org or email Kermarapa@tukibefore, with a long sad face careforcows.org.